Good morning. My name is Daalder. I'm the president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and it's a great honor of me to welcome all of you here. We're so pleased that you are here for what is now our 6th annual Global Health and Development Symposium, and this year we are examining empowerment for global good. The symposium is the flagship of our Women and Global Development Forum, a dynamic program series that brings together diverse and powerful domestic and global voices highlighting issues and ideas affecting women and children and all of us here in the world. This week, of course, is also the time when the world's leaders gather in New York for the UN General Assembly, where they come together to discuss the world's most pressing challenges. We at the Council are keeping up with the momentum of those meetings in New York, and though this isn't quite the United Nations headquarters, in fact, it's quite much nicer, the lineup of local and global leaders you will hear from today is no less impressive. Gender equality has been at the top of the global agenda for quite a while, and yet progress on this very important effort has been painfully slow. Research has clearly demonstrated the real benefits of having equal numbers of men and women at the table, whether it's on boards, in leadership, corporate, or nonprofit, or in peacekeeping missions. It's hardly a secret to realize that when women win, we all do. Yet despite ample calls for change, less than a quarter of the world's parliamentarians today are women. And the workplace statistics are equally disappointing. According to a study by the Rockefeller Foundation, 1 in 4 Americans think it more likely we will be colonizing Mars before achieving gender equality on the Fortune 500 CEO company list. So here's the question for us today. How can we make workplace on this planet more equitable before we start colonizing the next planet? We here at the Council pride ourselves on the quality, the depth, and the breadth of our content, and we always want to be practical, talking about issues, about new ideas that have a real impact on the world. And so it is today, when we want to talk real issues and discuss real solutions. Whether it is through reinventing traditional work structure to be better fit parenting needs, or through engaging the next generation of leaders, today our speakers will share their journey from having a aha moment to making a tangible difference. When we met the last time in March, I stressed the need to raise our voices and the voices of others on the challenging issues of our time. And we need to do so again today. We need to be demolishing the concrete ceiling, rerouting the off-ramps, creating healthier futures, re-scripting traditional gender roles. And these are just some of the ways women and girls and men and boys can work together towards catalyzing action and empowering for global good. You have all the details in the program today in front of you, so I won't go through that. But as you can see, we have a full house today, and we're grateful for all of you for coming here and joining us. None of this, however, wouldn't be possible without the amazing and strong support of countless people and institutions, and we are extremely grateful to all of you for that support. First among them, I want to thank our sponsors who continue to believe in this series and this effort. Many of them have been with us since day one. Our lead sponsor, Horizon Pharma, our supporting sponsor, USG, our patron sponsors, the Frankel Family Foundation, the Holtus Trust, and Ashley and Avery McCall. Thank you for your continued support of the symposium and for the Women in Global Development Forum. We're also delighted to once again be partnering with 23 global strategic partners who are helping to implement the solutions you will be hearing about today. And as always, we're delighted to host such a large number of young people here with us. And it is through our sponsors' support that we are able to facilitate their participation here today. Engaging the next generation is a strategic priority for the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. So thank you for being here, for participating in these important discussions, and I hope today will inspire you to take the action and make your contribution towards tackling the global challenges that you and we all face together. Thank you all for being here, one and all. And now I would like to welcome our first introducer to the stage, the Senior Director of Talent Management and Diversity at USG, Ms. Gina Max.
Good morning. Boy, good morning. Gosh, welcome. Very pleased to be here. My name is Gina Max. Again, I'm the Senior Director of Talent Management and Diversity for USG Corporation. Very pleased to be with you this morning and very pleased to get us started with our very first panel. Wanted to make a couple introductory remarks. First, wanted to just quickly mention a little bit about USG Corporation. We are a leading manufacturer of building products and innovative solutions. For more than 110 years, we've developed groundbreaking products that have helped millions of people and advanced the entire building industry. One of those such products is sheetrock brand gypsum panels. We're very excited to be celebrating the 100-year anniversary of sheetrock brand panels this year in 2017. Thank you for joining us for the Fall Global Health and Development Symposium. I am truly honored to welcome you to this morning's opening panel. We'll explore women's leadership, economic empowerment, and gender equality. At USG, diversity and inclusion are some of our most important corporate values. We work hard to enable continuous employee development and growth, and we're committed to the career advancement of our 7,000 employees. Having women in leadership roles can drive sustainable development and community investment. Yet, leadership roles are disproportionately held by men. We currently hold about 23% of seats in global governments, and as of 2017, there were only 32 female CEOs in the Fortune 500. Just want to let that sit for a second. 32. We know that investing and empowering women has a global impact. It improves gender equality, poverty eradication, and it spurs economic growth. Engaging women and girls, and truly all people, as agents of change is crucial for catalyzing action and achieving results. And while some progress has made, I think we all know we have a long road to go. It's important that we band together and we find solutions. Today's panelists will share their views on the progress that's been made and how we can crack, or should I say demolish, it's a much better word, the concrete ceiling toward gender equality. We'll learn what can be done to stimulate change, and we'll implement policies that will encourage universal gains. And we'll discuss solutions that expand opportunity and create impactful change. You can view our speakers' bios on the screen and in your booklets, but I would like to highlight a couple of their many accomplishments. In the center, we have Her Excellency Lilianne Ploumen. Lilianne is the Minister of Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation of the Netherlands. She's responsible for Dutch policy on trade, development cooperation, and foreign aid. In January of 2017, she launched the initiative She Decides to maintain family planning programs for women and girls in developing countries, which has raised over $300 million and is backed by nearly 60 countries. To Lilianne's right is Gayle Smith. Gayle is the president and CEO of One Campaign, an organization dedicated to fighting extreme poverty and preventable disease. She previously served as the administrator of the U.S. Agency for International Development and as special assistant to Presidents Clinton and Obama, as well as senior director at the National Security Council. And our moderator, to my left here, Julie Gichuru. Julie is a Kenyan entrepreneur and African media personality. She's the founder and CEO of Arimus Media. She also hosts 2 current affairs television programs, the African Leadership Dialogues and Sunday Live. Each year, the Global Health and Development Symposium grows in attendance and in diversity, and I can truly see that here today from the stage. We're lucky to have such a broad group of panelists presenting throughout the day. These people are advocating across the globe to empower women and advance our workforce. We'll take questions from the audience following the panel, as well as through our online survey application. The link will be displayed on the screen. If you have an internet-enabled device, please type chi.cnf.io, which has been on the screen, into your browser, and you can select today's program. I'm going to turn the program over to Julie, but just wanted to thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for that introduction. Let me just encourage us to have an open and earnest conversation this morning. So let me start by saying I am proudly a woman. I'm proudly a working woman. I'm a mother and a wife, and so proudly a family woman. And when we hear the numbers that have been shared this morning, does it make you shiver? That in 2017, we are talking about the fact that we are half the population, and yet 22 to 23%, that's our representation in public sector. We heard the numbers from the private sector. It is even worse. And so I want us to keep that in mind as we start to look forward and ask ourselves, what are the effective measures that we need to take to ensure that my daughter is not seated here, your daughter is not seated here having the same conversation 20 years from now. So ladies, I'm so happy to have you on this panel. We go straight into it. And Lilianne, I'll start with you, with your permission. We're talking about a concrete ceiling. What holds this ceiling up? What is this ceiling? What are the systems that ensure it lives on?
Yeah, thanks. And I'll try to do this in 1 minute. But let me get just back to what you said earlier. I think all of us don't want our daughters to sit here and realize that it will take 170 years to close the gender gap, the difference between men and women. Having said that, my mom only had 6 years of education, came from a very traditional Catholic family, farmer's family, and here I am, being a minister in a government. So change is possible, and it can be quick. But there are some prerequisites to that, and that goes to your question. One, of course, is that the culture and the attitude in your own family matters a lot. So if you are raised or you're raising your kids, giving boys and girls the same kind of education, rewarding them in the same way, that helps. Because in larger society, my country is a progressive country, but also in my country, there are underlying mechanisms that hold women back. So in our country, for example, there is this feeling that you cannot be a good mother if you're also a working mom. Now, that holds women back to really strive for a full-time career. And if you want to be in that top fortune list, you can't do it by working 20 hours a week. You have to go for it. And so I think what happens around you is as important as the legislation. We have great legislation, but we still have a gender pay gap. So starting small, encouraging your kids, being a role model is, I think, very, very important to try and destroy that ceiling.
Well, and I think that's so powerful because often we look at institutional issues and we don't start in the home and in the family. And actually, if we look at how we bring up our children, there are nuanced differences with the way we might be treating our girls and our boys that could impact on them. Thank you so much for giving us that insight. Let me come to you now, Gayle, on the same question. To you, what are the systems that give power to that concrete ceiling?
I mean, I find it helpful to think about...
Do you have the mic?
Oh.
Yes.
I do have a mic. Is it working?
Yep.
Okay. Think about three things. The first is access. So whether it is access to healthcare, access to education. One of the things we're very focused on is that there are 130 million girls around the world that are not in school, right? And we know that when they're not in school, we're incurring losses on healthcare and expenditures and losses to the economy. So access, health, education, and financial instruments. Standing, which is the legal foundation upon which we all stand. And if a country has laws that by definition say a woman cannot inherit property, or a woman cannot divorce, then you've got all sorts of structural problems on that side, and then there's a voice. That's representation in political life. It's also representation in community life. And I think those are the three things that are restricted and the three things we have to fight for. I would say, to your point on progress, I'm actually not pessimistic about this.
Okay.
I mean, I'm fierce about this, but I'm not pessimistic, because I think that the one thing I would throw into the conversation, are there any women here who've had a discussion about this issue or any issue with male colleagues, and have you been told you're being emotional? I'm pretty sure never happened, right? So I think part of the challenge is the totally legitimate emotion, like it's not right. It's not right, period. The passion and the compassion that we have about fixing this, I think we need to drive home with the facts. And the facts are, we know that if you invest in kids in the first 1,000 days of their lives, they are healthier. We know if you send a girl to school, you save money in your healthcare budget and you grow the economy. We know if you provide access to financial instruments to women, you're more likely to get a better return than if you invest them in men. So it's emotional because it's wrong that we've got these three constraints, but you cannot grow an economy, you cannot grow a business, you cannot sustain progress if you hold back half the population. I think we need to push. Every time somebody tells you you're being too emotional, throw a fact in their face.
Right.
Politely, maybe.
Not emotionally, calmly.
I think emotion is fine, but I think the thing is, I think it's part of the
Right.
the problem with the debate is that, I mean, I can get real emotional about it, but the facts are on the side of gender equity.
And I'm going to come back to that and talk about strategy a little bit later and how strategic we should be in the things that we're doing. So I'll come back to that in a short while. Let me come back to Netherlands now. And Netherlands, ladies and gentlemen, has been a particular champion for gender equity and for women's rights as well, and has made a commitment, I believe, to ensure that gender is a cornerstone of both its national and its global policy. So if you could take us through some of the policies, the implementation, the actions that you're taking, and what in particular is working really well at local level and at global level.
Yeah, thanks. Let me just say one thing too about what Gayle says, which is, I think it's very important that we make the moral case. I mean, everyone is equal. Look at many constitutions, the Human Rights Bill, but increasingly the narrative of gender equality is a business case, is proving to be very effective. And so we're working on the two avenues, so to say. If women would have access to economic means and the gender pay gap would be closed, I think in 10 years we would add $12 trillion to GDP. So who's emotional about economics? I mean, I think we should all be taking that perspective too. Now, the Netherlands. We have done a few things very well, I think. There's very strong legal frameworks that make it possible for women and men to have equal opportunities, equal access in all the areas that Gayle mentioned. Education, healthcare, and where we see that equal access is not there, we try to make amendments. So I will be a member of parliament in a few weeks, and I already introduced a bill to close the gender pay gap that we also have in the Netherlands, which is 7%. And so legal frameworks are very important, but to have strong legal frameworks, you have to have strong voices in politics and in communities. Yep. And so looking at, and that it's not, it's not necessary that those are only women's voices. Try to be effective and get everyone's voices, but to make sure that in politics we have this very strong attitude of that everyone deserves an equal opportunity. And even if that isn't reality for everyone at this point in time, I think in the Netherlands we all agree it's not a good thing to have this inequality. At community level, I would say that women need to be much more, they need to translate what the hurdles they experience in their everyday life to their daughters, to their neighbors, and speak out. So in politics, it's important to have women in parliament, but it's very important to have women at municipal councils, in school boards. And so here I think we're doing quite well. So for women to step into the public space and raise their voice is, I think, something that we have encouraged, and that is really driving the success of, let me say, the legal frameworks that we're able to decide upon.
Thank you for that, Gayle. I'll come to you now on two issues. So the importance of having women in the room, at the table, represented, whether it's, on some of these boards or, in Parliament making the laws. But also there's the question of women feeling bold enough to use their voices, because I think that also is a problem where you're seated at that table, but something's holding you back. How do we break through that? And also with young girls now, getting the foundational elements right. What must we do to ensure that we're building stronger, bolder young ladies?
I think there are two sides of a coin here. I think the natural instinct is to say we need to provide training to young leaders, support to young leaders, and I think that's absolutely on the mark. But I think we need to also provide voice to young leaders when they're young. So if you are in a meeting, I've been in meetings, particularly in Africa, where you've got a lot of powerful people around the table, and there's a 15-year-old girl who's going to tell the story about education or healthcare or child marriage, and I guarantee you that everyone in that room hangs on every word she says. Mm-hmm. And so I think creating more of those platforms where we offer the training, we offer the support. You've done a lot of that in your role. You'll soon join the ranks of unemployed former development ministers. I did a lot of that. In my role, the One Campaign supports a lot of this, but I think giving them the platform now, because like everybody's got a mother, a lot of people have daughters and sisters, and it is remarkable when you get to people at that personal level. So giving them voice now is, I think, one of the single most important things that we can do.
Okay, and it's great to know it is happening and you are seeing those voices and people are hanging on there everywhere. Slowly. Okay. I'm coming to the floor in just a moment with some more questions. I do want to talk about the fact that we've been discussing this forever. We've just come from UNGA, and I think, I'm sure, you've been in sessions listening to the gender discussion. Which forums are proving to actually be successful and which ones are just the kind of, we're still talking?
Yeah, but the talking is also important. I mean, for many meetings around these issues, the meeting is the message. And for example, when I heard about the World Bank for the first time, like 30, 40 years ago, they didn't talk about gender, and they did have women employees, but in the program, no one talked about what is the role of women and what should it be. Now, it's all talk about how do we engage women. Same at the General Assembly. The way that men and women talk about women's issues is very important. It can be degrading, but it can also be uplifting. I was at an event where 3 presidents from the African continent, the president from Zambia, Uganda, and Malawi, were talking about ending child marriages in their country. Now, talking about effectiveness, I think a local leader is much more impressed when his president says he shouldn't marry his young girls of at the age of 12 than a minister from the Netherlands. And so that didn't get the headlines, that meeting.
But it's
I thought
happening.
it was very important and very powerful.
That's incredible. Yeah, I need to say, actually, in Kenya, our top leadership has actually been jailing chiefs for supporting FGM. So, and when you see the structures come out and support our girls, it makes all the difference. Gayle?
I would agree that I think the discussions are important. When I look at international fora that are changing this, I'd look at one end here and one end here. At the top, Christine Lagarde is the head of the International Monetary Fund. She can run circles around any finance minister on the planet, any economist in the universe.
Yeah.
She's a woman. She talks about gender, and it's not, let's give her 10 minutes for the gender talk. She's talking in the language of international finance and the global economy about gender in a way that is overwhelmingly persuasive. And so I think that's real, that's changed, I think, a discussion about the global economy in a way that's very important. Right. The other end of it is in the nonprofit sector and in the NGO sector, in the civil society groups on the ground. We find at one, for example, we do have a gender equity problem which goes entirely the other direction. The majority of our staff are women, not because we chose to, but because I think the nonprofit sector is one that is heavily populated by women. What that means on the ground, I was just in Africa with our team, the one team on the ground in Africa. Watching those women community organizers, advocates on the ground, whether talking to communities or talking to the African Union, that's another institutional shift, I think, that is very powerful. Now, it should be women and men. All of these things should be. But women as leaders in their community and leading the change process, I think it's coming up from here and starting to come down.
That's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, could I add one strategy that has been proven to be very successful? And I might, want to even throw it at Mr. Daalder for his consideration. The Australian Prime Minister decided 2 years ago that he would never again sit on a panel which would only be a male panel. Yeah. So he would either say, I'm not coming, or he would say, you need to invite a woman, or he would say, I can come, but then you have to give me 10 minutes to talk about gender issues. And Australia is not, I'm not judgmental, this is a fact, is a conservative country, and this was a very right-wing prime minister. To say that these issues are not about, progressive, conservative, about politics, it's about people taking the stage and saying these things. And I heard that Justin Trudeau was supposed to be on a panel organized by Bloomberg, and no woman was there. And he said, well, I'm not coming. And then they invited Christine Lagarde.
That's incredible. I'm coming to the floor now, and I think it's those examples. We do need those initiatives where the he for she type things, where we get all the voices speaking towards the issue of gender equity. Please put up your hands if you have a question and comment. As I come to you, I just want to point out the fact that progress has been made in so many countries, and let's just highlight Rwanda and Nicaragua, which are listed in the top 10 of the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Index. Just for your reference, the United States is at number 45. With that, I come to the floor. Please put up your hands if you have a question. There are people with mics who are close by. They'll come straight to you. No questions? I have questions coming in on digital, so that's fine if I don't have questions. Yes, please.
Yes, to something you just said, and we were talking about this earlier this morning. I think one of the pieces of that is if you think about the U.S. and where we are, we have a campaign called Poverty is Sexist. Yeah. And I think part of what we also need to always bear in mind on these things is you can be seeing great gains in gender at the top and in the levels of the more powerful or progress. But the fact of the matter is, as long as we have structural poverty in this country or anywhere in the world, that's also one of the lids on progress. Yeah. Oh. And I bet it informs our numbers here, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. I had a great question. It's disappeared, but I remember what it was. Digital systems. So somebody had asked, how do we get young boys to be the agents for the change that will come in the next few decades? And I just want to give an example of something we're doing in Kenya. I run a debate show with high schools across the country. We right now have 600 high schools participating. And we always give the boys' school the motion to support gender equity, and we hand the girls' school the other motion. These are some interesting things that we play with to make sure that boys are championing for girls. But from your perspectives, what can we do you think, to make sure that boys are part and parcel of effecting the change?
Yeah, well, of course, first of all, getting back to what I said earlier, it's very important the way that in your family you talk about women and girls and about boys and men. But more and more we see that boys can be engaged because they are teachers, they are health workers. I talked to a health worker from Uganda just a few days ago, and he was trained in Uganda and abroad, came back to his village, started a clinic, and he said, I said to the women who come for when they're pregnant, when they want to have sex education, I say, you can only come if you bring your husband. I don't give your treatment if you don't bring your husband, because he said, otherwise, these young men in young marriages, they just don't have a clue about what's happening to their wives, and they need to be part of that. And so there is, of course, all these, high up conferences that we need to discuss these issues, but we also need to listen to what people are actually doing in their day-to-day practical life to engage men in a very strong and effective way.
Gayle, your thoughts on this?
I would agree with all of that, and I'm reminded of being in a village once where they were doing public health education, and they had girls and boys there, and they led the boys to believe that everything the girls were being taught would happen to them was also going to happen to the boys. It got their attention. It was actually quite effective. But I think it comes down to two things. I think it comes down to education, how you're taught in the family, how you're taught by your community and political leaders, and how you're taught in school. And it comes down to justice, because as you have said repeatedly on this panel, it is about equality for everyone. It isn't about, we're okay, we should give them their rights. It is about the fact that we need to think differently about our communities and recognize the fact that, as it turns out, justice is a really smart thing.
Right. It makes sense.
It makes for more peace. It makes for stronger economies and happier people. And I think if that's embedded in the education system, that makes a difference. Boys learn something different and girls learn something different from a very young age.
And I think, just noticing in some of our spaces, there's a rising concern that the boy child is now kind of being disadvantaged. I don't think it has happened yet, but I think it's a warning sign that we just want to build them together.
The first 1,000 days of boys and girls are equally important. I mean,
great.
There you go.
Question that has come in on quotas.
Yeah.
Are they effective?
Well, we don't have quotas in my country. And I have always been against quotas, because I think, if you have to get to that kind of measure, you're far off from where you need to be. But I really changed my opinion on this, because I've seen that quota can be effective in countries like, I think, Sweden and Norway. They have quotas for women in the boardrooms. In countries like Rwanda, they have quotas for women parliamentarians. And you see that that is successful. Now, why is everyone against quota? Is because you think, well, I don't want to be there because I'm a woman. I want to be there because, I'm good, which I actually am, like you. But women are so shy sometimes to display their qualities and talents that quota serves as a way to encourage women to speak up and say, hey, I'm here. And so in our political manifesto, we have put the introduction of quota.
Okay.
We lost the elections, by the way, so it will not happen. But I do think that we should stop being shy and use this argument like, I don't want to be there because I'm a woman. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you want people to do things for the right reasons and as a matter of principle. I do think setting goals and targets, I mean, if you look at the Millennium Development Goals, if you look at the SDGs now, they do concentrate the mind. And I think a lot of the decision makers on where women are in the workforce or anywhere else, some of them disagree that there should be more women, and some of them just don't think about it all the time. And so having something out there that reminds people, I think is not a bad idea. And I think my views changed on that over time also.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating question here that says, how does the ordinary woman become part of this effort, this movement? What can she do?
Well, she is part of the movement, and everyone can contribute in her own way. I do think that for women, it is important to speak up and not be shy. Very often, when I ask a woman, when I tell her that I want to promote her, she will say, "Oh, really? You think I'm ready for that now?" And while a man would say, "Oh gosh, I thought you would never ask." And so this is really, in this day and age, that's what's happening. So for women to feel that whatever they do contribute to that movement by being a good example for her kids, by being an active mom and helping out in the community, by talking in a way that people feel included. So sometimes it's quite simple. Not everyone needs to be a full-time activist, sitting on panels like this.
So, your Poverty is Sexist report, really highlights the challenges that are faced by women. When you hear that ordinary woman tag, grassroots woman, what do you think immediately?
I think of what they're already doing. I mean, I'll tell you, I did an interview recently, and they said, "Who's your favorite female icon?" I think they were looking for a really famous person who'd done something like She Decides or something, and actually, the women who've been the icons in my life have been the mothers and grandmothers who were not born with the good fortune that I was, who were absolutely determined and not necessarily outraged, but believed that they could do better. And if you look at movements of ordinary women around the world, I think they're quite powerful. I think what we don't do is we don't give them visibility. And I get it. I get that having an individual icon you can flash on the screen and say, "I want to be her." But I think we also got to figure out how we can do "We want to be them."
And
give visibility to those who are not women leaders because they're making $1 billion or running a country, but because they're taking power into their own hands to change their communities. And I think giving them some visibility.
Great.
I was going to do just that, Gayle. When President Trump reinstated the Mexico City policy, which is also known as the global gag rule, taking away funding for overseas organizations that work on family planning and access to safe and legal abortion, I started to start a movement to make up for the lost funding. And so what happened was that many colleague ministers from all over the world reacted, but also many citizens. And the one that moved me so much was an elderly woman came to our embassy in Washington, which is really not in the city center, but at a very remote place. So she took the effort, went to the Dutch embassy, handed over an envelope with an encouraging note for me, like, "Keep up the good work, and I believe in you." And she put in a $5 note. And, that was so encouraging to me to know that somewhere in Washington, a woman had heard about this and thought, "You know what? This is the thing that I can do. I can encourage her and I can contribute." And so to bring that to the stage, I think, is very important.
I want to stay with this and really tap into the question of role modeling and how important that is. I have to tell you, I was at an event listening to one of the top women leaders in the corporate sector speak about how her daughter doesn't speak to her anymore because she had to literally, forget about the family, focus, but that's what it takes. And she said, "Ladies, if you want to survive, that's what it takes." And I thought, I've fought the system. I've breastfed my children. I have pushed my way and said, I will have both a career but I will have time for my family. And so for me, how do we ensure that there are enough role models that each of us can find someone we can look to with the value systems that we understand, that we can aspire to? And it speaks to what you're talking about of who do we give the limelight? How do we do better on this?
Well, I think there's another piece of what we have to do there, though, is figure out the issue of unpaid care. Because some of us may be able to decide to have families and a highly successful career, but I think depending on where you are in the economic system, it's harder. And the fact that a lot of women can't make that choice. But I think in terms of the role models, I mean, what I would like to see is the role models that are the highly successful, famous women, but it is easier to raise children and go to work when you can afford nannies and drivers and all of that. But also to show some of the role models that are teachers, women teachers or men teachers that are with the program. Working women who are not necessarily that visible. Because I do worry a little bit that if we send a message that success for a woman is a whole lot of power or a whole lot of money, those are signs of success, clearly, and we prize those a great deal. But we've also got to show that for boys or for girls, success is being a really good teacher, right?
Wow.
And so how do we give visibility to those who aren't yet famous?
Ladies, we've only got a few more minutes, and I do want to do something interesting in the audience just before we wind up. I see a hand. I will come. Let me ask this. Are we strategic enough? Very briefly, please.
Yes, we are.
Okay, Gayle.
I think so, but I think we can be more strategic. Always. I mean, we can always.
We can do better. So
Always.
Okay, but we are strategic. So it's
We're
not
brilliant.
a huge gap.
We're perfect and totally capable.
Do we have a question there? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marian Santoso, and I'm a PhD student in nutrition. So the 1,000 days thing is, I'm slowly learning more and more about women's environment and gender because we're realizing how important it is. So thank you. But I just came back from a year in Tanzania, and one thing that I hear over and over again is like, this little project of yours, this agriculture nutrition project will not do anything about gender unless you change land rights law, inheritance law. So it's kind of like, I know I need to just keep trucking and working, and because I know other people working on that big issue. So what is your advice for us?
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like it's so much. There's so much that needs to get done.
Yeah, how to keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, well, don't get bogged down. That would be the first thing to say. And what helped me a lot was to engage with other men and women who are working in these areas, to really not try and do also what they are doing, but to see how that what they are doing is helping, my focus. And I have been hanging around a lot with women's groups, women's organizations, and I think that really helps. So every little bit does help, more so if you're really, and I think you are, really very conscious about the impact of what you're doing on women and how to make it work for women. So just keep it up.
Don't get bogged down, one step at a time. Just keep moving. Gayle?
Yeah, I also think cynicism is poison. And I think to somebody who says you're never going to have any impact if you're not doing all these other things, I think you just say thank you very much.
Yeah.
And carry on, because it is brick by brick.
Right.
Everything is connected. That's absolutely right. Unless we have world peace, total equality, then none of it matters. But that's where we're trying to go, brick by brick.
Okay, brick by brick. Don't get bogged down. Let's just do it one step at a time. Our time is up. I'm so sorry. I will just end by saying that coming back to your point of what you do in your own ecosystems, in your homes. I'm busy going around the world discussing gender issues, pushing things at the office, and then I realized at home that I kept saying to my daughter, she couldn't do the things that my son did. And I only noticed one day when I said no to her and her shoulders. And I just noticed her body posture change as she exited the room. And I went quiet and I thought, what did I just do? And I called her back in the room and I said, I'm so sorry. I just realized when your shoulders hunched, what I've been doing to you. And I'm sorry, it's because I'm so scared, but you can do it. And immediately she woke up. And so let me just caution us all. Sometimes we look at the big picture and we don't see what we are doing in our own spaces. Thank you so much. We'll be back with so many more discussions. What an incredible panel. Thank you.